He just wanted to end a conversation, but a word spoken by a baby he had never held in his arms stopped time and changed everything. If you like stories like this, be sure to subscribe to this channel. We post daily. Continuing. Raphael Morrison parked his black Porsche in front of the residential building in Notting Hill, his hands still clenched on the steering wheel, even with the engine off. The contrast between his imported car and the modest facades around was stark, as if two different worlds had collided on that London corner. He took a deep breath, adjusted the Rolex on his wrist and checked his Italian tie in the rearview mirror. His armor was in place. 3 years. 3 years since he had last set foot in that neighborhood. 3 years since he had fled like a coward when Marianne was 7 months pregnant. 3 years pretending that part of his life didn't exist, diving headfirst into business, building luxury residential towers between London and New York City, accumulating zeros in his bank account as if every million could erase the guilt he carried in his chest. Her message had arrived that morning, like all. The others he systematically deleted without reading. But this time something made him stop. Maybe it was the exhaustion of years trying to forget. Maybe it was the anger of not being able to move on completely. It didn't matter. He had made a cold, calculated decision. He would go there, look Marianne in the eyes and tell her once and for all to stop sending messages about the child. He didn't want to know. He never wanted to know. The building's elevator was broken. Raphael climbed the 4 flights of stairs with the patience of someone accustomed to having everything work perfectly around him. In the dimly lit corridor, he counted the door numbers until he found apartment 42. He stopped in front of the peeling wooden door and took another deep breath. It would be quick. 5 minutes at most. He pressed the doorbell firmly, expecting to hear Marianne's familiar footsteps approaching, but it was another sound that reached his ears first. An infant's babble coming from inside the apartment, followed by her voice saying something he couldn't understand. Raphael frowned. Of course the child would be there. It was stupid to have thought it would be an adults-only conversation. The door opened slowly, and Marianne appeared with a baby in her arms. Raphael quickly studied her. She was thinner, with deep dark circles under her eyes, and her brown hair haphazardly tied up. She wore a simple blouse and faded jeans, but still had that natural beauty that had captivated him years ago, when they met during the inauguration of one of his first developments in South London. Raphael. Her voice was neutral, without surprise, as if she had been expecting that visit for a long time. Marianne. He kept his tone professional, distant. We need to talk. She stared at him for a few seconds before stepping aside. Come in. Raphael hesitated. Entering meant exposing himself more than he planned, meant seeing up close the reality he had chosen to ignore. But before he could refuse, something happened that changed everything. The baby in Marianne's arms saw him, and his dark eyes, just like his, widened. The child stretched out his chubby little arms towards Raphael and babbled a clear, crystalline word that cut through the air like a blade. Daddy! Raphael froze. He literally froze in place, as if someone had paused a movie. That word, spoken with the absolute innocence of a child who knew nothing about abandonment or hurt, destroyed in seconds all the emotional armor he had so carefully built. The baby continued to reach out his arms to him, repeating, "Daddy, Daddy," with a toothless smile that lit up his chubby face. Raphael couldn't finish the sentence. His voice was gone. The words were gone. His entire prepared speech had evaporated. "He's 1 year and 4 months old," Marianne said softly, observing his reaction. "And yes, you're the first person he's called Daddy." Raphael felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. He looked at the baby, at his son, and saw his own features mixed with Marianne's. The shape of his eyes, the way he frowned when concentrating, even the stubbornness in his gaze were familiar. How had he missed this? How had he chosen to miss this? Can I hold him?" The words came out before he could think better of it. Marianne hesitated, but then extended the child to him. Raphael received his son in his arms, as if he were holding something made of crystal, so afraid of breaking him that his hands trembled. The baby looked at him curiously and then smiled again, placing his tiny hands on Raphael's face as if trying to memorize every feature. "Hi, Michael," Marianne said softly. "This is Daddy." Michael. He had a name. Of course he had a name. Raphael felt a wave of guilt so intense that he had to lean against the doorframe. How many things had he missed? First steps, first words, feverish nights, Sunday mornings playing in the park? "Come in, Raphael," Marianne said again, this time with less coldness. "Let's talk." The apartment was small but cozy, with simple furniture and toys scattered across the living room floor. Raphael observed everything with the eyes of someone seeing a completely new universe. There were children's drawings taped to the refrigerator, a high chair with leftover food, diapers folded on the sofa, baby books stacked on the coffee table. It was an entire life he had chosen not to know. "Sit down." Marianne indicated the sofa, taking Michael back from his arms. "You said we needed to talk." Raphael sat on the edge of the sofa, suddenly uncomfortable in an environment so different from the luxurious offices and meeting rooms where he spent most of his time. He watched Marianne place Michael in the playpen with some toys and then sit in the armchair opposite him, crossing her arms. "I came here to—" he began, but the sentence died in the air. How could he say he had come to cut ties definitively after what had just happened? "I came because of the messages." "Which you never answer," she completed, without emotion in her voice. I didn't know how to answer." "Or you didn't want to answer," Marianne corrected him. "Raphael, you haven't answered a single message in 1 year and 4 months. Not when Michael was born, not when he had pneumonia at 6 months, not when he started walking, nothing, absolute silence." Every word was like a stab. Raphael lowered his gaze, unable to face the accusation in her eyes. Because it was true. He had read all the messages. He had seen the photos she sent. He had known of every milestone in his son's life. And he had chosen to ignore everything. "I was scared." The words came out in a whisper. "Scared." Marianne laughed, but there was no humor in the laugh. "You build 50-story skyscrapers, close billion-dollar deals, face international investors, but you were scared of a baby." "Scared of being like my father." Raphael finally looked up at her. "Scared of failing, of hurting, of not being able to love properly. My father was a cold, absent man, obsessed with work. I grew up promising I would never be like him. But when you got pregnant, I realized I didn't know how to be different." Marianne studied him in silence for a long moment. Michael babbled in the playpen, completely oblivious to the tension between the adults. "So you decided for me," she said finally. "You decided that I would prefer to raise a child alone than have to deal with your fears and insecurities. You made that decision for both of us without even talking." "I thought—" "You thought about what would be easier for you," Marianne interrupted him. "It wasn't protection, Raphael, it was selfishness. You left me 7 months pregnant because you didn't want to face the possibility of failing as a father. You preferred to fail before even trying." The words cut deep, because they were absolutely true. Raphael had fled from responsibility, had chosen the easiest path, or what seemed easiest at the time. He had never stopped to think about what Marianne was feeling, what she was facing alone. "How was it?" he asked softly. "The birth, the first few months." Marianne took a deep breath before answering. "Terrible. I was terrified, alone, with no idea what to do. My mother helped me as much as she could, but she was ill at the time. I had postpartum depression, Raphael. I spent months thinking I wouldn't make it, that I was a terrible mother, that I had done everything wrong." Raphael felt his heart clench. "Marianne, No." She raised her hand, stopping him. "I don't want your excuses now. I want you to understand that your choices have consequences for other people. I survived. Michael is fine. But it was very difficult. And it wasn't just difficult, it was unnecessary. We could have faced it together." Michael began to whimper in the playpen, and Marianne got up to pick him up. The child immediately calmed down in his mother's arms, resting his head on her shoulder with familiarity. Raphael watched the scene with a mixture of admiration and envy. That intimacy, that bond, was something he had lost forever. "He's beautiful," Raphael said. His voice choked. "He's just like you were as a baby," Marianne replied. "Your mother showed me photos once, the same stubbornness in his gaze." Raphael was surprised. "You talked to my mother. She came to see me when Michael was born. She brought clothes, diapers, tried to help. She was more present in 2 days than you were in a year." More guilt. Raphael closed his eyes, trying to process the information. His mother had met her grandson, had tried to help, and he didn't even know. How had he become so disconnected from his own life? "Why did you come back now?" Marianne asked, gently rocking Michael. "After so long ignoring our existence, why did you decide to show up today?" Raphael hesitated. How could he explain that he had come with the intention of cutting ties definitively? How could he admit that he was only there to ask her to stop trying to include him in his son's life? "I received your last message and—" He stopped, unable to continue the lie. "And decided it was time to tell us to leave you alone once and for all." Marianne completed the sentence for him with a bitterness that cut like glass. "It was written all over your face when you arrived here, Raphael. You came to get rid of us definitively." He couldn't deny it, because it was true. Marianne knew him too well to believe lies. "But then Michael said, 'Daddy,' and your plans changed," she continued. "The question is, why did they change? Out of guilt? Out of pity? Or because you genuinely want to be here?" Raphael looked at Michael, who was now playing with the buttons on Marianne's blouse, and felt something he couldn't name. It wasn't just guilt or pity, it was something deeper, more frightening. It was love, a love he had tried to deny and suffocate, but which was there, growing in his chest like something alive. "I don't know," he admitted. "I don't know what I want or what I can offer. I just know I can't leave now." Marianne watched him in silence for a long moment before sighing. "Then stay," she said simply, "but not as a visitor. If you're going to stay, stay for real. Help with dinner, learn to change diapers, wake up in the middle of the night when he cries. I want to see if you can last a whole night being a real father." Raphael nodded, not knowing what he was getting into, but knowing he had no choice. For the first time in years, there was something more important than his business, more important than his real estate empire, more important than his comfort zone. Michael chose that moment to look directly at him and smile again, babbling "Daddy" as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And maybe it was. Maybe it always had been. The first challenge came 15 minutes later when Michael started to cry. It wasn't a soft cry of a tired baby. It was a desperate wail that echoed through the thin apartment walls. Raphael instinctively stood up, but stopped, not knowing what to do, watching Marianne check the child's diaper with automatic, efficient movements. "He's clean," she said, placing her hand on Michael's forehead. "He doesn't have a fever. Must be hungry." "Hungry?" Raphael looked at his watch. "But it's not even 4 in the afternoon." Marianne laughed for the first time since he had arrived, but it was a tired laugh. "Babies don't follow office hours, Raphael. They eat every 3 hours, sometimes less. And Michael is in a growth spurt, so he's been eating more." She walked to the small kitchen and Raphael followed her, watching her prepare a bottle with the expertise of someone who had done it hundreds of times. Every movement was calculated, testing the milk's temperature on her wrist, shaking the bottle, checking again. It was a dance she completely mastered, and he had no idea how to begin. "Want to try?" Marianne offered him the bottle. Raphael looked at the bottle as if it were an alien artifact. "What if I do it wrong?" "He'll let you know," she said simply. Michael is very communicative when he doesn't like something. Reluctantly, Raphael took the bottle and then Michael from Marianne's arms. The child stopped crying instantly, as if the simple change of arms was enough to calm him. Raphael offered the nipple of the bottle, and Michael grabbed it with both hands, sucking hungrily. "Like this." Marianne adjusted the position of his arms. "Tilt it a little more, otherwise he'll swallow air, and then he'll get colic." Raphael followed the instructions, concentrating as if he were signing a £100 million contract. Michael drank peacefully, his eyes fixed on his father's face as if trying to memorize every detail. It was a simple, everyday moment, but Raphael felt as if he were doing something monumentally important. "How did you learn all this?" he asked softly, so as not to disturb Michael. "Trial and error." Marianne leaned against the kitchen counter. "The first few months were terrible, Raphael. I had no experience with babies. I was alone, afraid of doing something wrong. Michael cried a lot. I cried with him. There was one night I called your mother at 3 in the morning because I didn't know what else to do." Raphael felt his stomach churn. "What happened?" "She came. She stayed here for 3 days helping me, teaching me. She was the one who taught me how to bathe him, how to burp Michael properly, how to identify the different types of crying." Marianne paused for a moment. "She asked about you. I said you were traveling on business." "Why did you lie?" "Because the truth would hurt her as much as it hurt me." Marianne stared at him. "Your mother believed you would come back, that it was just a phase, that you were just scared. I let her believe that." Raphael looked away, unable to sustain the intensity of Marianne's eyes. Michael had finished the bottle and was now playing with his fingers, squeezing with surprising strength for a baby. "He needs to burp," Marianne instructed. "Hold him upright on your shoulder and gently pat his back." Raphael did as she said, feeling Michael's small, warm body against his chest. It was strange how something so simple could be so emotional. The child hiccuped a few times and then let out a loud burp that made Raphael laugh. "Good job." Marianne smiled genuinely this time. "You have a natural talent for eliciting burps. Finally a useful skill," Raphael replied, surprised he could make a joke at that moment. Michael began to get sleepy in his arms, his head heavy against his shoulder. Raphael felt a wave of tenderness so intense that he had to sit down on a kitchen chair. How was this possible? How could he love someone he had known for less than an hour so much? "It's hard, isn't it?" Marianne observed his expression. "To realize that you can love someone more than yourself." "I didn't know it was possible to feel this way," Raphael admitted. "With you it was different, it was gradual, but with him it's like someone flipped a switch." "It's because he's your son." Marianne sat in the chair next to him. "A father's love is visceral, primitive. It has no logic." "How did you manage to deal with it alone?" The question came out more distressed than he intended. "To feel this and have no one to share it with?" Marianne was silent for a long moment before answering. "Some nights I couldn't. I'd sit by his crib crying with him, apologizing for not knowing what to do. I thought he deserved a better, more prepared mother. Marianne, but then I looked at him and saw that he just needed love, and love I had plenty of." She gently touched Michael's head. "I learned that being a parent isn't about having all the answers. It's about being present, about trying again when you make mistakes, about putting his well-being above your own." Raphael processed her words as he gently rocked Michael. The child was almost asleep, his tiny eyes closing and opening in a struggle against sleep. "He needs to sleep," Marianne said softly. "I'll put him in his crib." "Can I do it?" Raphael asked. "I mean, can you teach me?" Marianne hesitated but then nodded. "The crib is in the bedroom, I'll show you." The bedroom was small but cozy, with a light wooden crib against the wall and a colorful animal mobile hanging above it. Raphael watched Marianne lower the blinds to darken the room and then signal for him to approach the crib. "Slowly," she whispered. "Support his head and back at the same time." Raphael bent over the crib with extreme care, as if handling nitroglycerin. Michael grumbled when he was placed on the mattress, but didn't wake up completely. Raphael stood there for a moment, watching his son sleep, marveling at the perfection of that little face. "Come," Marianne signaled for them to leave the room. "Let him rest." Back in the living room, Raphael sat on the sofa with a strange sense of accomplishment. He had fed his son and put him to sleep. These were simple, basic tasks, but he felt as if he had climbed Everest. "You said he had pneumonia," Raphael recalled their earlier conversation. "How was that?" Marianne visibly flinched. "Terrible. He was 6 months old, started with a cough that wouldn't go away, At first I thought it was normal, but then he started struggling to breathe. She paused, her eyes welling up. I took him to the emergency room alone at 2 in the morning. The doctor said if I had waited a few more hours... My God! Raphael felt his blood run cold. He was hospitalized for a week. I slept in the chair next to the hospital crib, afraid to close my eyes and something would happen. Marianne wiped away a tear that had escaped. It was the longest week of my life. And I was alone, Raphael. Completely alone. The guilt Raphael felt was almost unbearable. He had been living his life normally while his son was fighting for his life in a hospital, and Marianne was facing that nightmare without support. What kind of man did that? What kind of father did that? I should have been there, he said, his voice hoarse. Yes, you should have. Marianne didn't try to console him. But you weren't. And I learned that I can't count on you. And now? Raphael asked. What happens now? Now you leave and our lives continue as before, Marianne said, firmly. Michael and I are fine. We don't need charity or guilt. What if I don't want to leave? The words came out before Raphael could think better of them. What if I want to stay, want to learn, want to be the father I should have been from the start? Marianne looked at him with skepticism. Raphael, you already ran away once when things got difficult. Why would it be different now? Because now I've seen, he gestured towards the room where Michael was sleeping. I've seen what I lost. I've seen how much he needs a father. I've seen how much you went through alone because of me. Seeing is easy, Marianne countered. Staying when it's hard, waking up in the middle of the night, cancelling important meetings because he's sick, that's different. Then give me a chance to prove it. Raphael leaned forward. 1 week. Let me stay 1 week and learn how to be a real father. 1 week? Marianne laughed without humor. Raphael, being a father isn't an intensive course. It's a lifetime. I know, but I need to start somewhere. Marianne stood up and went to the living room window, watching the street below. Raphael waited in silence, knowing she was weighing her options. Part of him hoped she would say no, that she would send him away and end the torture of seeing everything he had lost. But a larger, deeper part prayed that she would give him a chance. 1 week, she said finally, without turning around, but with conditions. Anything. You sleep on the sofa. You share all responsibilities, changing diapers, feeding, waking up in the middle of the night. And when Michael cries, you can't just hand him over to me and walk away. All right. And no cell phone while you're with him. No emails, work calls, nothing. When you're here, you're really here. Raphael thought of all the meetings he would have to cancel, all the business that would be put on standby. His company was in the middle of 3 important projects. He had investors to attend to, contracts to sign. But when he looked at the door of the room where Michael was sleeping, none of that seemed important. All right, he repeated. Marianne finally turned to face him. And Raphael, if you give up halfway, if you run away again, don't ever show up here again, understood? Understood. At that moment, Michael woke up crying. Marianne made a move to go to the room, but Raphael got up first. I'll go, he said, determined. Raphael, you don't even know why he's crying. Then you'll teach me. Raphael was already heading to the room. I'll learn by doing. In the room, Michael was red from crying so much, his little arms stretched upwards. Raphael picked him up with more confidence this time and immediately checked if his diaper was dirty, as he had seen Marianne do. It was. Marianne, he called, I need help here. She appeared at the door, with an amused expression. First lesson in fatherhood, diaper change. The next 15 minutes were the most challenging of Raphael's professional life. Michael wouldn't stop moving, trying to roll over while Raphael struggled with adhesive tapes, wet wipes, and a new diaper that seemed to have a life of its own. Marianne gave basic instructions but let him figure out the rest himself. Is it not too tight? Raphael asked, after finally managing to close the diaper. There's only one way to find out, Marianne smiled. Wait and see if it leaks. Michael stopped crying as soon as the diaper was changed and smiled at Raphael as if he had performed a miracle. It was a pure smile without judgment, full of admiration for the father who was there trying to get it right. He trusts you, Marianne observed. Even without knowing you, he trusts you. Raphael felt his chest tighten again. How can he trust someone who was never here? Because you're his father, Marianne said simply. For him, that's enough. Raphael looked at Michael, who was now playing with the buttons of his expensive shirt, drooling on the Italian fabric, and for the first time in years, Raphael didn't care about the clothes. He didn't care about anything else besides that moment, that child, that unexpected chance to be better than he had been. Thank you, he said to Marianne. For what? For giving me this chance. For not sending me away. Raphael took Michael's free hand, who immediately grabbed his finger. For taking care of him alone when I was too cowardly to stay. Marianne didn't answer, but something in her gaze softened a little. It was a small, hesitant start. But it was a start. The first night was a disaster. Michael woke up at 2 in the morning with a cry that seemed to pierce Raphael's eardrums, who had finally managed to fall asleep on the uncomfortable sofa in the living room. Confused and still half asleep, he stumbled through the furniture in the dark until he reached the bedroom, where he found Marianne already standing by the crib. I said we'd share responsibilities, she murmured, but there was a tone of resignation in her voice, as if she already expected him not to keep his word. Sorry, Raphael ran a hand through his hair. I didn't hear properly. I heard, but it took me a while to process. Michael continued crying, and Raphael instinctively extended his arms. Let me try. He's hungry, Marianne said, handing him the baby. I'll warm up the bottle. Alone in the dark room with Michael, Raphael felt a wave of panic. The child's crying seemed desperate, urgent, and he had no idea how to console him while Marianne prepared the bottle. He tried rocking Michael as he had seen her do, hummed a tune he couldn't quite remember, even walked in circles around the small room. Shh, it's okay, he whispered, more to convince himself than the baby. Daddy's here. The word daddy came out naturally, and Raphael was surprised by the ease. A few hours ago, he couldn't even imagine himself in that role. Now, at 2 in the morning, in the dark, trying to calm his crying son, that identity began to make sense. Marianne returned with the warm bottle, and Raphael managed to feed Michael by himself this time, remembering her instructions about the correct angle and the need to burp the child afterward. Michael gradually calmed down, his sobs diminishing, until he fell asleep peacefully in his father's arms. You did well, Marianne admitted when they returned to the living room. For someone who's never done this before. It wasn't as hard as I imagined, Raphael lied. It had been terrifying, but there was also something deeply satisfying about being able to calm his own son. Wait until he has colic, Marianne smiled tiredly. Then you'll know true despair. They remained silent for a few moments, the apartment quiet except for the distant sound of London's nighttime traffic. Raphael watched Marianne settle on the sofa, realizing for the first time that she was wearing simple cotton pajamas, her hair loose over her shoulders. There was a strange intimacy in that moment. They were practically strangers now, but there they were, sharing the early morning hours as concerned parents. Mari. He used the nickname without thinking, as he used to. Can I ask you something? She nodded, but became visibly tense at hearing the nickname. Did you ever consider raising Michael away from London, in a smaller, quieter city? Marianne looked at him in surprise. Why do you ask? Just curious. Raphael hesitated. I imagine it's difficult to raise a child here alone with all the costs. Ah. Marianne's voice turned cold again. Are you worried I'll come after you for child support? No, it's not that. Raphael raised his hands. It's just that, well, you mentioned before about moving to another city. I thought maybe... I considered it, Marianne interrupted him. My sister lives in Manchester. She has a more structured life there. She offered help, said Michael, and I could live with her until I got myself reorganized. Raphael felt his stomach drop. And will you? Move? Depends. She looked at him directly. Depends on some things changing here. What kind of things? Michael having a present father, me having a support network, feeling less alone, Marianne enumerated with her fingers. Basic things every family should have. Raphael absorbed her words in silence. If Marianne moved, he would lose the chance to know Michael, to be a real father. Worse still, they would have every reason to leave if he couldn't prove he was there to stay. "I won't leave again," he said with conviction. "Not this time." "Raphael," Marianne sighed, "you say that now. But what about when you go back to your real life? When you have important meetings, business trips, when the responsibility starts to weigh heavily?" "My real life is this now," he gestured around the apartment. "He is my real life. You have a 200-square-meter apartment in Mayfair, a company with 50 employees, meetings that move millions." Marianne pointed to the sofa where he had slept. "Do you think you'll be able to live in this little world forever?" Raphael didn't know what to answer because she was right. His life was completely different from this. But looking around, at the scattered toys, at the crib where Michael slept, at Marianne in her pajamas with messy hair, he couldn't imagine wanting to be anywhere else. "I can try," he said, finally. "Trying isn't enough, Raphael. Michael needs certainties." They were interrupted by Raphael's cell phone ringing. He looked at the screen. It was his partner, probably calling from the United States where it was still business hours. Without thinking, he answered. "Hello?" "Raphael, good to catch you. I need to talk to you about the American's proposal." His partner's voice echoed through the silent apartment. Raphael saw Marianne's expression change instantly. She rolled her eyes and got up from the sofa. "Wait a minute," Raphael said on the phone and then looked at her. "Mari, it's just a minute." "Sure." She went to the kitchen. "It's always just a minute." Raphael hesitated between ending the call and following Marianne, but his partner was talking about a crucial meeting the next morning, a contract that could determine the company's expansion. It was the kind of call that in any other circumstance would be his absolute priority. "Robert, can I call you in the morning? He looked at the kitchen where Marianne was washing dishes with abrupt movements. "I'm busy with something important." "More important than £15 million, Robert laughed. "Man, what's this about you disappearing? No one's been able to reach you since yesterday." "It's complicated. I'll explain tomorrow. Raphael, the Americans are waiting for our answer by noon. If we lose this deal..." "We won't lose it. I'll handle it." Raphael hung up before Robert could protest further. When he went to the kitchen, Marianne was leaning against the sink, her back to him. £15 million, she said without turning. "Sounds important." "Not more important than being here." "Raphael," she finally turned around. "You don't have to pretend your life doesn't exist. I know you have responsibilities, commitments. I just don't want Michael to get used to you, and then you disappear again when things get serious." "I won't disappear. How can I be sure?" Marianne's voice grew louder, and she immediately looked towards the bedroom, worried about waking Michael. "How can I trust someone who left me 7 months pregnant?" The question hung in the air between them like an accusation. Raphael felt the weight of every word, of every hurt he had caused. How could he ask for trust when he had betrayed her in the worst possible way? "You can't," he admitted. "Not yet. But I can try to earn it again." Attempts don't pay. Rent, Raphael. Attempts don't feed a child. Attempts don't hold anyone's hand during a difficult night. Marianne crossed her arms. "I need guarantees." "What kind of guarantees?" "Consistency, real presence, clear priorities," she enumerated. "I want to know that when Michael is sick you'll be here, not in a meeting room. I want to know that when he needs his father, you won't be on the other side of the world closing deals." Raphael absorbed her words. Marianne wasn't being unfair, she was being realistic. She had learned the hard way that she couldn't depend on him, and now she needed concrete proof before risking her son's well-being again. "What can I do to prove it?" he asked. "Stay," she said simply, "not just this week. Stay for real. Reorganize your life to include us, not the other way around." "What if I did that? If I changed priorities, delegated more responsibilities at the company, spent more time in London?" Raphael tried to imagine what that would be like. "Would you give me a real chance?" Marianne studied him in silence for a long moment. "Raphael, I don't just want a father for Michael. I want a partner for myself too. The words cut the air between them, loaded with meanings neither of them was ready to fully explore. Partner, he repeated, his voice hoarse. Someone I can trust, with whom I can share decisions, fears, joys. Marianne looked away. Someone who chooses to be here because they want to, not because they feel obligated. Raphael took a step towards her. Mari. No. She raised her hand. Not now. First you need to prove you can be a father. Then, maybe, we can talk about the rest. They were interrupted by Michael starting to cry again. This time Raphael didn't hesitate. He went straight to the room and picked up his son, automatically checking his diaper. It was clean. Must be colic, Marianne appeared behind him. Sometimes it happens after he drinks too fast. What do I do? Massage his tummy, circular movements, she demonstrated. And patience. A lot of patience. The next hour was one of the longest of Raphael's life. Michael cried inconsolably, and nothing seemed to work. Raphael tried rocking, singing, massaging, walking around the apartment, but the baby remained in agony. His hands began to tremble with nervousness, and he felt the same despair he had felt in his first important career meetings. I don't know what to do, he admitted, his voice full of frustration. Nothing works. Welcome to fatherhood, Marianne said, but her voice was gentle. We don't always have the answers. How do you endure it? Seeing him cry like this without being able to help? Because I know it will pass, and because he needs me there, even when I can't solve the problem. Marianne took Michael from his arms. Sometimes just being present is enough. Miraculously, Michael calmed down in Marianne's arms, as if recognizing her familiar touch. Raphael felt a pang of jealousy mixed with admiration. She made it seem so natural, so easy. Don't be jealous, Marianne said, reading his expression. I had a 1 year and 4 months head start. You'll get there. Will I really? If you truly want to, yes. She settled Michael in the crib, who had finally stopped crying. The question is, do you truly want to, or do you just want to feel less guilty? Raphael reflected on the question as they returned to the living room. It was an important and honest distinction. Part of him really was there out of guilt because of the shock of seeing all he had lost. But there was something more, something that grew with every hour he spent with Michael and Marianne. In the beginning it was guilt, he admitted. But now it's different. I don't want to be anywhere else. Now it's easy to say that. It's 3 a.m, you're tired, emotional. Marianne sat on the sofa. Tomorrow, when you wake up and remember your real life, it might be different. What if it isn't? What if I wake up tomorrow and still want to be here? Then we'll see. She pulled a blanket over her legs. Day by day we'll see. Raphael returned to the sofa that served as his bed, but he couldn't sleep. He lay staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had changed in less than 24 hours. That morning, he was a single, successful businessman, focused only on business. Now he was a father, learning to change diapers and dreaming of a future that included midnight bottles and first steps. His cell phone vibrated again, another work message. Raphael looked at the device for a long moment before turning it off completely. For the first time in years, there was something more important than answering emails. In the dimness of the apartment, he could hear Michael's peaceful breathing in the bedroom and Marianne's soft movements as she settled on the sofa. It was a different kind of silence than he was used to in his empty Mayfair apartment. It was a full silence, laden with presence and possibilities. Raphael closed his eyes and, for the first time in months, slept deeply. The third day began with Raphael being woken by Michael screaming at 5 a.m, not from hunger or discomfort, but from pure tantrum. It was the kind of cry that pierced through walls and made neighbors bang on the wall in protest. Raphael jumped off the sofa, still hazy with sleep, and ran to the bedroom where he found Marianne already trying to calm the child. "What's wrong? Is he sick?" Raphael asked, alarmed. "No, he's bored." Marianne was visibly exhausted, with deep dark circles under her eyes and disheveled hair. "Sometimes he wakes up like this, for no reason. It can last for hours." Hours! Raphael felt panic setting in. But the neighbors, they've already complained. Marianne sighed. Mrs. Martha upstairs has come down, twice this week. She said if she couldn't sleep, she'd call Child Protective Services. Raphael took Michael from her arms, trying the ritual he had learned in the past few days, rocking, softly singing, checking the diaper, offering a pacifier. Nothing worked. The baby continued crying as if in agony, his face red and his fists clenched. Let me try. Marianne extended her arms, but Raphael instinctively recoiled. No, I can do it. He was determined to solve it alone, as if proving his competence as a father was a matter of personal pride. But Michael didn't stop. The crying grew, louder, more desperate, and Raphael felt his own anguish grow proportionally. His arms ached from rocking so much, his throat was hoarse from singing, and he began to sweat cold with the pressure. Raphael, give him to me, Marianne insisted. I said I could do it. He replied more sharply than he intended and immediately regretted it. Sorry, I just want to learn to do this right. Marianne watched him for a moment before leaving the room. Raphael continued trying to calm Michael, but the child seemed to sense his frustration and cried even harder. After another 15 infernal minutes, Marianne returned with a cup of coffee and sat in the bedroom armchair. Sit down, she said calmly. Marie, Sit down, Raphael. Her voice had an authority that brooked no argument. Reluctantly, Raphael sat on the edge of the bed, still holding Michael, who continued inconsolable. Marianne stood up and positioned herself behind him, placing her hands over his. Relax your shoulders, she whispered near his ear. He feels your tension. Raphael tried to relax, but he was so nervous that his muscles felt like stone. Marianne began to guide his movements, teaching him to rock more gently and rhythmically. Her proximity was unsettling. He could feel the warmth of her body, the soft scent of her shampoo, her tranquil breathing contrasting with his own despair. Like this, she murmured, her hand still covering his. Feel the difference? Raphael nodded, not trusting his own voice. With Marianne guiding him, Michael gradually began to calm down, his sobs diminishing until he finally fell asleep in his father's arms. How do you do that? Raphael whispered, afraid of waking the child. Practice. Marianne pulled away, but the sensation of her proximity still lingered in the air. And a lot of coffee. They placed Michael in the crib in silence and left the room without making a sound. In the kitchen, Raphael sank into a chair, exhausted as if he had run a marathon. I don't know how you did this alone for over a year. He ran his hands over his face. 3 days and I'm already at my limit. There are worse days. Marianne served coffee for both of them. Last week he had colic 3 nights in a row. I didn't sleep an hour. Raphael watched her with renewed admiration. Marianne had faced all that alone, without support, without anyone to share the weight of responsibility. And she was still standing, still caring for her son with patience and love. Marie? He hesitated before continuing. Why did you give me this chance? After everything I did, why did you let me stay? She thought for a long moment before answering. Because Michael deserves to have a father. And because deep down, I still believed you could change. Believed? Past tense? I'm still deciding. She looked at him over her coffee cup. You're trying, I'll give you that, but trying isn't the same as succeeding. Raphael's cell phone began to ring incessantly. He had turned it back on the night before to deal with urgent matters, but now he regretted it. It was Robert again, probably desperate with his prolonged absence. Answer it, Marianne said. I know it's important. Raphael hesitated, but answered the call. Robert was clearly agitated. Raphael, where the hell are you? The Americans cancelled the meeting because you didn't show up. £15 million down the drain. I said I'd handle it. How? From wherever you're hiding. Robert's voice echoed through the apartment. The company is going to hell, man. Marcia is threatening to resign. Investors are calling every 2 hours and you've just vanished off the face of the earth. Raphael looked at Marianne, who pretended not to be listening, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. "Robert, I can explain it here, in the office, in an hour. Or I'll call an emergency board meeting and assume the presidency temporarily." The threat was real. Robert had the power to do it, and Raphael knew it. "All right," Raphael sighed. "I'll go." He hung up and found Marianne looking at him with an expression he couldn't decipher. "You need to go," she said, and it wasn't a question. "It's temporary, just to put out some fires, reorganize things." "Raphael." Marianne stood up. "You don't need to justify yourself. I always knew your real life would call you back." "This is my real life," he protested, gesturing around the apartment. "You two are my real life." £15 million are also your real life. Marianne washed her cup in the sink, avoiding looking at him. "And the 50 employees who depend on you, and the investors, and everything you've built." Raphael felt immense frustration growing in his chest. How could he explain that none of that mattered to him anymore? How could he make her understand that being there, learning to be a father, was the only thing that truly made sense? "What if I didn't go?" he asked. "What if I called Robert and told him he could handle everything alone for now?" "You'd lose everything you worked to build." "Maybe it would be worth it." Marianne finally turned to face him. "Raphael, don't be impulsive. You have responsibilities, people who depend on you. You can't just abandon everything out of guilt." "It's not guilt." He stood up abruptly. "It's love. I love you. Both. I love being here. I love this crazy, complicated life you have." The words came out with more intensity than he intended, echoing through the small kitchen. Marianne looked at him in surprise, as if she hadn't expected that declaration. "Love," she repeated softly. Raphael approached her, invading her personal space for the first time since he had arrived. "Yes, love. For Michael. For you. For this family that I was too foolish to value before." "Raphael, I know I have no right to say this. I know I hurt you in a way that may never be fully healed. But I'm asking you for a chance, a real chance for us to build this together. What if it doesn't work? What if we discover we're two different people now? Then at least we tried." Raphael extended his free hand to her. "At least we don't spend the rest of our lives wondering what if." Marianne looked at his outstretched hand, and then at Michael, who was watching his mother with those intelligent dark eyes, as if he understood that something important was happening. "He needs a father," she said finally. "He has a father," Raphael replied. "The question is whether you want a partner." Slowly, Marianne placed her hand in his. "I do, but with conditions. Anything. No unilateral decisions. We're a team, or we're nothing," she enumerated. "And if you change your mind about this life, if you miss the adrenaline of business, you tell me. You don't run away again." "Agreed. And we'll go slowly. I won't move into your Mayfair apartment. I won't become the trophy wife of a rich businessman. We'll build our life our way." Raphael smiled. "Actually, I was thinking of moving here, if you'll let me." "To this 2-bedroom apartment in Notting Hill?" Marianne laughed. "Raphael, you don't even fit in the shower here." "Then we'll find a bigger place, here in the neighborhood, near the friends you've made, the routine you've built." Raphael leaned in and gently kissed her hand. "I want to be part of your lives, not rip you out of the life you have." Michael chose that moment to babble, "Mummy, Daddy," pointing at the two of them, as if giving his official approval for the reconciliation. "I think we have a vote of confidence," Marianne smiled, running her hand through her son's dark hair. "And your vote?" Raphael asked. "Can I stay?" In response, Marianne leaned in and kissed him softly. It was a hesitant kiss at first, laden with all the hurt and longing of the past few years, but it gradually deepened until it became a promise. When they separated, Michael was watching them with fascination, as if he had never seen anything so interesting. "I think he approves," Raphael murmured, his forehead resting against Marianne's. "He always wanted his daddy close," she whispered back. "Me too." "Then now you have him. Forever." 3 months later, Raphael was in the backyard of their new home, a cozy 3-bedroom townhouse still in Notting Hill. assembling a slide while Michael played in a ball pit nearby. Marianne appeared at the kitchen door with 2 glasses of iced lemonade and a smile that still made his heart race. "How's it going there, dedicated dad?" she teased, sitting on the grass beside him. "Your son inherited your impatience." Raphael wiped the sweat from his forehead. "He wants to play on the slide before I finish assembling it." "My son," Marianne laughed. "When he's whiny, he's my son. When he's cute, he's your son. When he's cute, he's our son." Raphael corrected, stealing a kiss. "Speaking of which," he stopped assembling the toy and turned completely to her, kneeling on the grass. From his shorts pocket, he took out a small blue box. "Raphael." Marianne's eyes widened. "Marianne Santos." He opened the box, revealing a simple and elegant engagement ring. "Will you marry me? Again, the right way this time?" Michael chose that exact moment to stand up in the ball pit and babble, "Mummy, Daddy," clapping his hands as if he understood the importance of the moment. "It's a conspiracy." Marianne laughed, tears in her eyes. "You two planned this." "He's an excellent accomplice," Raphael smiled nervously. "So, what do you say?" Marianne looked at the ring, then at Michael, who continued clapping in the sunny backyard, then at Raphael kneeling on the grass with messy hair and an expression of absolute vulnerability. "Yes," she whispered, and then louder. "Yes, I want to marry you." Raphael slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her with an intensity that spoke of promises kept and futures built on solid foundations. Michael cheered with delight in the ball pit, as if he understood that his family was finally complete. Later, when Michael was already asleep and they were lying on the new sofa in the living room, Marianne traced lazy circles on Raphael's chest. "Are you sure," she asked softly, "that you won't miss your old life?" "I've never been so sure of anything in my life." Raphael kissed the top of her head. "Do you know what the best part of today was?" "What?" "Assembling the slide. Something so simple, but knowing I'm doing it for my son, for our home, for our family." He paused, emotional. "It's the best work I've ever done. Better than closing a £15 million deal. Mari, I've closed dozens of £1 million deals, built skyscrapers, won awards." Raphael pulled her closer. "But I had never built a home, a family. I had never built something that truly mattered." Marianne snuggled closer to him. "I love you, Raphael Morrison." "I love you too, future Mrs. Morrison." From the bedroom, the soft sound of Michael's sleeping breath reached them, and Raphael smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow there would be more diapers to change, more bottles to prepare, more precious moments not to miss. And for the first time in his life, he couldn't wait to wake up.